Hey, you. Yeah, you. Put down your coffee and crank up your volume. You're entering the green side. Now here's your host, Taylor Mooney.
All right, welcome everybody to the Green Side Podcast. In the studio today, I have with me a very special guest. I have Dean of the College Rebecca Biron. She is the Dean of Dartmouth College. She is also a professor in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese and the program in comparative literature since 2006. I want to welcome Dean Biron to the studio today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So me and you first met in New York City for the final Posse Foundation interview. And for those who don't know, to put it into context, the Posse Foundation is a national organization that has a veteran-specific program they go over the country, interviewing vets. They whittle it down to a group of 20, and those 20 people go to New York City, and they do a final round of group interviews to compete for 10 scholarship spots. And it's a unique interview process from the very beginning. As you're doing group interviews, you're like building like Lego machines, but they're trying to see how you work as a team together. And I know that threw me. The first one I did in Washington, D.C., I showed up in a suit. Everyone else was like in jeans, and I was like, maybe, oh God, I'm overdressed. It's better be overdressed than underdressed. But either way, I showed up, and yeah, they told me it was a group interview, and I didn't quite anticipate like what it would be. I'd never done a group interview.
And you didn't know any of the other people in the interview?
No, I knew none of the other people, and it was just really, and not in a bad way. It was just like bizarre. I just wasn't expecting, especially coming from the military, when you have boards or like a group, something, there's a lot of structure and it's very hierarchical, right. And what's the question and what's the answer? And here they're like, here's around the corner we built a Lego machine monster guy, and we've given you the same amount and type of Legos in this bag.
They wanted you to imitate what they had built?
Right, and you could only send, I might be giving away their secret, so.
Oh yeah.
But this is just one secret. The rest can remain secret. But they want you to like basically work as a team, and you can only send one person at a time. You can't take pictures, you can't draw it, and you have to replicate the exact same thing. And they're just trying to see and how you actually work as a team, because I'm sure you know from just life that people say they're leaders and they're good at that stuff.
Right. Speaking about leadership is not at all the same thing as doing it.
Yeah, and you get guys in there that are like, barking orders or just sitting back. And so at first I thought it was a little bit loony. I was like, what did I got myself into? But then when I left, I thought about it, and I was like, wow, that's actually a really creative way to see if what I'm saying is true. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I did that, and you go through the process. You do a one-on-one interview, and then they select whether or not what school you get to interview with, because they have 3 partner schools, so Vassar, Wesleyan, and Dartmouth. And this is Dartmouth. We were Dartmouth's first year, but they call you and tell you which one you're going to interview for. I mean, you put out a preference list, but yeah, so they choose you. And then you fly to New York City, and 20 of you fly there, and 10 are going to get the scholarship. And it's also, again, kind of a group interview, and we got in small groups, and we're given prompts, stuff like that. But for me, it was funny because, there's a lot of pressure. You want to do well. And then, like you were there, so the dean of the college is here, the dean of admissions was here, like the admissions officer who does veterans.
And one of the
undergraduate deans. You're like, oh these are all deans. Like, like I really got to be on my game here.
Did you know who we were going to be, who would be the Dartmouth team before you went into that interview?
No idea. I had no idea at all who you guys are going to be. And so none of us did. And so then, none of us knew. Actually, I joke with my friend Ben, who's also here. He showed up and he was the only one not in a suit. And I remember that because you start doing this mental calculus in your head about people who you don't think quite have it.
Right.
And I was like, this kid couldn't even show up.
You thought that because of what he was wearing.
I was like, he didn't even show up in a suit. Like, how you want a scholarship to an Ivy League school? You can't even put a jacket on? Come on, man. Well, now that we're really good friends, he was still in the Marines and had to organize all this crazy stuff and get senators to allow him to leave Okinawa.
That's right, I remember that.
Yeah, and like there's a lot so he's still in the Marines, and all his suit stuff and all his clothes really were packed in a storage unit somewhere else. So he wasn't even going to North Carolina. He He was, flying straight to DC or New York City. So now that I know that, it's like, oh, well, that makes sense.
And also, you can respect the fact that he was adaptable and had confidence for
totally.
that experience, even though he probably noticed himself he was the only guy not in a suit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure he did. And that has to be unsettling. But I always joke with him that, you were the first person I mentally canceled out, and here you are, and here you're one of my better friends here. But anyway, so we met there, and also for me, my flight was delayed. I then got a taxi from the airport. I got stuck in a wreck in New York City. I was running late. I got to my hotel at 3 p.m.
Oh, wow.
And the interview was at 3:30 p.m. So I rushed upstairs. I had a suit. I brought a mobile steamer with me because it was folded up. I was steaming my suit, trying to shower. I had a migraine. I had a migraine. I hadn't eaten all day. And it was raining. It was pouring rain.
Yep.
So I remember holding my umbrella in one hand, and I had my phone for GPS in the other. And I'm walking, and I feel awful. And there was a Dunkin' Donuts. And I went in there and I was like, I need a bagel. Don't toast it. Just give me a bagel. Like I'm an animal.
You were just going to scarf that down and head on over to Wall Street, which is where the office is.
Yeah, it's literally on Wall Street.
Right.
And so I am eating that, trying to hold a phone, trying to hold my umbrella because it is pouring. My whole right side got soaked. My GPS took me the wrong direction for a bit. Or I didn't read the GPS right, however you want to think about it. And so I got there literally at 3:30 on the dot. And I remember one of the posse trainers was there, and she's like, "Hey Taylor, maybe you should go to the bathroom and dry off a bit because you're like so." I was like, "Yeah." So my head was pounding during this stuff. I'm trying to think about stuff to say to you guys that sounds like just articulate and just somewhat intelligent. And I think I was in a small group with you, and I said something. And then we had a break, and they have those snack tables, like cheese and grapes or something. And I was scarfing down, so I hadn't eaten really, so I was scarfing it down. And then you came up, and I'm like, oh, you're the dean of the college. You came up and you said something to me that you liked, or something about something I said in a small group. And I was delirious at this point. I had no idea what you were referring to, but I played along. I was like, oh, absolutely. I think that's really important for campus life. I couldn't remember anything I'd said.
Taylor, I thought we were having a genuine melding of the minds.
I know. We have since then.
That bonding experience.
Yeah. For me in that moment, I just was like, I hope she doesn't ask me follow-up questions about what I said, because I don't know anything I've said today so far. I'm so out of it. But I was just trying. I had crackers in my mouth, and I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, thank you." So that was my posse interview. So God, I hope that went well, because I don't even know.
That's funny.
The things that I said.
It's very different from my experience of that interview.
I imagine, yeah.
Yes.
What's it like on your end?
So our team, as you said, that was the first year that Dartmouth participated in the Posse Vets program, so we also didn't know what to expect other than the broad outlines of how Posse organizes the recruitment of students. We had signed on to the program, and we knew that Posse would be bringing us 20 students, and that we'd have to choose 10 together from that group. But the learning curve for us was really steep as well, because our group, as you said, was the dean of the college, the dean of admissions, an admissions officer, and another undergraduate advising dean. We 4 had never worked together on any project.
Oh, interesting.
So when we showed up, we had looked at all of the 20 students' applications together, and this is different from the regular admissions process because you're not individuals applying to Dartmouth. When students go through that process, there's a whole pipeline, streamlined kind of workflow for receiving the applications, reading them, processing them, scoring them, and then they go into another process of organization of different pools of types of students, right. To compose the class. And contract with the Posse Foundation is completely different. We know we're going to accept 10 of these students. That's the agreement. Right. So we get the 20, and we have to choose among them, and the admissions director has never done admissions this way.
Right.
I have never worked in admissions before. So the 4 of us coming to have this experience with Posse was probably just as surprising to us as it was, as the whole process was to you in terms of group interviewing.
Right.
for a selection. And so what I found that I was doing in the group meetings was mostly focusing on individuals and how well I thought the individual applicants would match or fit in with the quality and type of education that we offer in liberal arts at Dartmouth. And I suspect the admissions officers were trying to assess you through the active group interview process for the same things that they assess on the essays and the traditional application process, which would be very difficult because it's a translational exercise, right? And then, so we went, it's a 4-hour group interview, and we as Dartmouth representatives participate in all the small group work. Well, almost all of it. There are some things where the teams were doing problem solving or making up pitches to the president for urgent contemporary crises in international politics, and we walked around and observed how the groups functioned as groups. I hadn't been given sort of a template for evaluating group interaction, and so after the interview, the Dartmouth team meets with the Posse Foundation team, and we process all of our observations together. But we hadn't been given a set of guidelines to use. So it was just really interesting to see how all of those different perspectives and values for how you best select students for an elite educational experience should be done. I mean, it felt like a big learning experience and experimental at the same time.
Was there a lot of, obviously you can't talk about the the secret sauce of the back room of what you're actually talking about and what's going. But is it a lot of pressure?
We're talking about what you were wearing.
Did you see he wasn't even wearing a sport coat?
Yeah, so the Ben thing never for us was not an issue.
That's
never
disappointing.
Came up.
I wanted it to come. I wanted to tell him that he almost lost it because of that.
He lost 10 points because of that.
Yeah.
No,
Dang.
not true. Never mentioned.
So could I have shown up in jeans and a t-shirt? Would that have I'm just curious.
From my point of view, that wouldn't matter at all.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. So I mean, did you find that there was a lot of, I guess when you go back there, you didn't discuss, obviously, who's going to get it, because you guys decided the day or the next day, and the list is settled. This isn't like a week or 2 weeks, or, hey, we'll meet again another week to talk about it.
So Posse, the service they provide is the long-term kind of training or orientation that they do in the multiple meetings or encounters they would have had with each of you. Right. It lasts almost a year, right? Mm-hmm. From your first contact with them to that December interview. Had it gone from about January or February in 2015 to December 15?
Yeah, just about. I think I got on right at the end. But yeah, for a lot of people, it was like they've been in this pipeline for a very long time. For me, it's probably like 6 months. But yeah, it's still a good chunk of time
where you're... It's a multiple month engagement with the Posse Foundation. So what the foundation says is that when they present those 20 candidates, any of them, from Posse's point of view, should be an ideal candidate for admission to Dartmouth. And that our task in choosing the 10 is to choose the strongest group, not only as individual scholars, but as a group that can support each other. And that's the whole point of the Posse Foundation.
Right.
They send students as groups because in the traditional Posse Foundation, it's for students coming out of high school to get into elite institutions of higher ed who may not have been able to pass the regular admissions process because of all kinds of under-resourced issues in their high school experience. But as individuals, they're fully capable, academically talented, and if they come as a group to college, then the specific issues they face or challenges they face because of their background can get mitigated by their group.
Right.
And so since Posse, that's the whole foundation of the way Posse thinks, they're kind of guaranteeing that all of you as individuals would be successful, and our task is to get the strongest group together when we do the admissions choice.
That's interesting. So I guess sometimes when you're considering somebody, or not every time when you're considering somebody, you have to figure out would they mesh with the group as a whole, because some people might individually be high performers, but maybe they don't.
That's right.
Work well with others. I don't say we don't work well with others, but aren't as good as working well with others. That's very interesting. So for me, I know something that I was worried about is previously I didn't have the most stellar grades. High school grades, I don't know, I had 2.8 maybe. I had a really good ACT score from high school, but my GPA was not stellar. And then I had gone on to the Naval Academy for 2 years where, I was battling the brain injury stuff. So, there might have been a reason there, but nonetheless, I did very poorly there. I had a garbage GPA there. But since then, I had gotten into Northern Virginia Community College as well as a night program at George Washington University, and I'd had straight A's after that. So that was good. I had the most recent data being A's, but I was still very worried that they would see, or you guys would see, the old academic trend and say, wow, he did do well at these schools, but the Naval Academy is an elite school, and he did not only didn't do well, he did extremely poorly. What do we make of that? And I think that kind of speaks to the posse whole person approach. I mean, one, you still have to have some relevant data that means you could be competitive here. You can't.
That's right.
Something recent to show. Even if you were bad in high school, take a community college class or two. Take English 101, an intro math course, and just show you can perform. So we know now that you're there. But that the whole person approach allows you guys in posse to put past prior performances that weren't so well into their proper context. You were 18 or 16, and now you're mid-20s or what have you. You're different. I mean, how much? I guess I really want to, if someone's listening, like if another veteran or another person is sitting on the couch thinking about applying to a good school, and they're having the same thoughts I have, but to them it's a barrier to reaching out and risking rejection. I mean, how do I don't know, how do you encourage somebody to say, hey, no, if you've got some recent data that's pretty decent, like you should really seriously just at least put an application in, see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. On the one hand, the Posse Foundation itself is the bridge for this problem because it's a challenge. The typical way that admissions offices work is to rely on a whole person application at the same time that the hard metrics matter more. If you're receiving thousands and thousands of applicants, right, or applications, then the test scores and GPAs are one of the more solid forms of knowledge you get, or quantitative knowledge that you get about the students, and that you can compare them in some kind of, at least the presumption is that that's an objective way to compare people. And then other information like high school counselor letters, community letters, and students' own essays and statements and assessments of their own strengths and desires and forms of curiosity. All of that goes together in the traditional admissions framework. What Posse does is provide this value-added service, which is to force a focus first on the person. And our institution's agreement with Posse is to say, yeah, actually, for a certain cohort of students, this is a wonderfully positive way for us to select for what their experiences have been, which are not the same at all as the experiences of a traditional high school student applying straight into college. So it's not just that you've had time to go from 19 to 25 to recover a sense of seriousness or find your purpose academically. Specifically, it's military service being another form of education. So what the Posse Foundation does for us is that it helps us codify that, or the Posse Foundation identifies people as vets who have used their military service as a form of personal development and education. And it comes in the form that traditional college admissions don't necessarily know how to recognize. Right. And so for us, the Posse Foundation is adding that element, doing that piece of it for us, and then presenting us with the 20 students. Vets who don't go through posse, Dartmouth has a really strong tradition of accepting transfer students who are veterans who apply directly to Dartmouth. And that pipeline actually is also special, and Dartmouth has done, I think, a much better job of that than many of our peers. And this was started by our former president, Jim Wright, who in 2005 he himself is a former Marine, and he embarked on a very specific project of going around to military hospitals and doing the education that you just talked about, talking to people who are, leaving the military for whatever reason, and reminding them that their life experiences, their work experiences, and their education in the military is an enriching part of their record, and they should take that up in their self-presentation and not limit themselves to the notion of objective metrics that the colleges typically might rely on more than you would want them to if you want them to be able to assess your current status as a thinker, as someone who wants to pursue a really high-quality general education. Right. So at Dartmouth, we have these two streams for attracting vets.
All right.
One through transfer admissions, and in that case, if you're a transfer student applying to Dartmouth, then your transcripts from your community college or other college experiences are read very, very carefully. But even then, the military experience, the life experience, and how you articulate why you want to come to Dartmouth is more important.
Right. Sometimes the struggle I have when trying to mentor people or talk to friends and get them to at least consider about applying here, I think a lot of people still just don't think that it's possible. It's still something that you had a connection. So I think a lot of what you said is really important, because so many guys, when you pitch the idea to them, mm-hmm. they still don't see it as something that's tangible, that's something they could really reach out and grab. And then when I do try to encourage people, something that comes up is, well, I've already done a year or two of college. I don't really want, sometimes depending on how it all works out, you might have to give up some credits. If you do posse, you have to give up all of them. And I think many of us gave up a good chunk of credits. I think, like me personally, I was going to graduate George Washington University in I think at the end of the summer or in December. Mm-hmm. And now I'm a freshman here. So
why did you
it's a good question
to do that?
So yeah, I'll speak on mine. I was going to ask you, from someone who's been in academia, you can even speak as a professor, put your professor hat on and discuss why coming to a liberal arts institution like Dartmouth is important. I can say for me it was important because I have sampled a lot of different schools. I almost think I could write a book on the undergraduate experience, because
maybe you should.
I might because I started off at Indiana University out of high school, mm-hmm. and I joined a frat, and then it wasn't me. I just really didn't feel fulfillment in that life, and nothing against that school. I just wasn't for me, so I enlisted, and then I got accepted and went to the prep school for the Naval Academy. And then I went to the Naval Academy for 2 years. And then I got medically separated, and I went to the community college and George Washington. And so I've experienced all kinds of different schools. So actually, I did not intend, and I was not going to apply for any more schools. I was in this George Washington program. I was just ready to finally finish college and be done with it. But it was through the community college, where I was still splitting time and taking some classes, I got this email. Mm-hmm. And I opened it, and I'm like, I'm not a veteran scholarship. I'm not transferring schools. But then I saw Dartmouth was on the list, and I was like, huh. And so this is more of a personal anecdote. For me, I kind of had a bit of a chip on my shoulder that my past school didn't work out, because mm-hmm. it was a great school, it didn't work out. And nothing against George Washington, but I felt like Dartmouth, obviously, is an Ivy League school, is a top-tier school, and this was my chance at a rebound, or my chance to prove I could still do it. Mm-hmm. And so I was willing to give up the credits. I also was willing to give it all up because of what I think a place like this can do for me personally and professionally, and that when I look back on my life, an extra 2 years of college will seem like nothing.
That's right.
And I discussed with another professor the idea of delayed gratification, and sometimes it's hard for people. And still hard for me. Don't get me wrong. I would love to be graduating right now. I would love to be living even within a few hours, if not the same city as my girlfriend. I'd love to have the same friends that I had in Washington, D.C. when I lived there. It is, of course, tough to uproot your life and come to New Hampshire. But to me, it's worth it because of, again, what I'm exposed to here as far as just the classes and the professors and the caliber of professor you have. It's just amazing to me. And the visitors that you get exposed to and you can just talk to and go to a lunch on campus, like you're like, I can just sit down and have lunch with you, like you want to talk to me, you know, like that's like I did one with Andrew Card, who was George W. Bush's chief of staff, who famously leaned over and informed President Bush that 9/11 had occurred in that famous photo.
Right.
And I mean, he'd served generations since I think Ford or something, and just to I get to have lunch with a few other people with him. That's just one example, right? But it's like, wow, like that's crazy. And then you can get that kind of thing. And also, I mean, just let's be honest. I mean, being at a school like this can propel you professionally if you use it right. I mean, you can't just show up at an interview and say, I went to Dartmouth and just sit back and cross your arms and think you have the job. But it can still be a huge boost up. And for me, not coming from money and having a single mom and, you know, watching my mom work really hard, working all these night shifts growing up, trying to put me through a good school and all these types of things. I really wanted, I mean, she always encouraged me to try to go to a good school, not because we had a life that was bad, but there were better things out there, and that perhaps going to a top tier school or pushing myself academically would be a way to where I wouldn't have to work all these night shifts, like and extra shifts and overtime like she did. And so I always kind of like that work ethic was always ingrained in me, and that idea. And so when the Dartmouth email came up, for all those reasons I just listed, I was like, you know what? Does it really suck to give up like all those credits? Yeah, it does. I'm not gonna lie, it does. But then when I'm here and I get to just be on campus here and go to classes here, I'm like, no, it's totally worth it. And even some guys struggle because Dartmouth isn't in a big city,
right?
And it is very much an undergraduate 18 to 22 community that is very centered around Greek life and frats and sororities. And nothing's wrong with that. That, you know, I had that time in my life, but I'm definitely way out of that. So at times it can be isolating, but that's where the posse thing can come in. But even with or without that, for me, I'm still motivated by the idea of making this work, making it work well, and then doing great things afterwards. So I really don't get too bummed or at all get bummed that I had to give up credits or I'm here. I'm actually really excited, and keeping that motivation has actually allowed me to do pretty well here, and that feels good to prove it to myself that I can have like a 3.5 GPA when I previously was doing garbage. Like, oh my God, I'm at an Ivy League school with like a pretty solid GPA. Like I'm not dumb, and that's kind of what I want to get across to other vets too. It's like, dude, if I can do this, if my buddies here can do it, you can do it too, if that's what you want. And I think that's always my biggest hurdle when I'm mentoring people is guys just don't think it's possible. And I think the posse thing for me helped because there's all these interviews and they have this like almost like this inside track in a way for you in, so you kind of feel like it's inside track or like a...
Well, it's very intentional preparation that takes multiple months.
Right.
And there's a reason. I mean, and I think they're being very successful in that method.
Yeah. No, they've done well. And I was curious what your thoughts were. I kind of gave some of mine, and I can go on at length about why I think vets aren't at top tier schools. But do you have anything even just from an educator standpoint, or just having... I mean, you've taught probably all kinds of different peoples, you know, throughout your whole career. Like, do you think there's something about the veteran community why we're underrepresented? Is there something institutionally, or is it something within the people themselves?
Well, before I address that, I want to say that your speech about the value of starting over in the first year of a 4-year liberal arts education is a fantastic one. You touched on the two primary aspects of it. One is the pure intellectual joy and richness of being in a place that is actually accepted from regular society, the need to hold a job and that kind of thing. It brings a community of intellectuals together, or at least people who say they strive to be intellectuals, and gives us time and resources for inviting spectacular world stage figures and that kind of thing for all of us together to process however much we can all of that input and all those forms of asking questions and learning the disciplines, the academic disciplines necessary to pursue those questions in a concentrated way. So that's the aspect of undergraduate education that I think is the most meaningful and purposeful and valuable in the world. The second aspect that you talked about was access to more opportunities for your future career, but not just your future career. Also, 50 years from now, 40 years from now, what kind of thinker and actor in the world will you be? You will be a more powerful one for having had access to these specific resources during the time that you're training your mind and your attitudes toward growth and leadership. And I mean leadership in the intellectual sense as well as in kind of the professional sense. So you just named the two reasons. The idea about giving up credits is interesting. I mean, there's a concrete economic motive for many people to graduate as quickly as possible so that they can go into the workforce.
Right.
And there's no denying that a 4-year liberal arts education like this one it requires a form of privilege to be able to enter it and engage in it for 4 years. We try to, this is a need-blind institution, so we provide scholarships for everyone we accept, such that our goal is to provide equity of access to that form of education so that the students who come here don't need to be working a full-time job while they're here. At the same time, we're not promising a direct kind of return on investment, as you very wisely pointed out. This is all about opportunities and opening up the world for everybody. When we think about why veterans are underrepresented in higher ed in general, and specifically in elite higher ed or elite liberal arts higher ed, this goes back to what we were talking about before. Many people join the military right out of high school because higher ed isn't right for them at that moment. Mm-hmm. And there's no natural reason that everyone should be focused on their curiosity and their long-term goals and their ability to treat being a student as a job when they're 18 or 19. Many people develop in different ways. Many people, as you said, the fraternity system at Indiana just it felt weird to you. Mm-hmm. And that could be for a whole host of reasons that have to do with your personal development, your values, your family background, also the need to earn money right away. Mm-hmm. There are many reasons. And so it seems to me that specifically for vets, for people who go into the military as young people, using that experience to reorient their relationship to learning and personal development and growth and intentional engagement with open questions rather than simply going to get a job is really important. And it makes sense that there are a number of people who will be highly successful, who are super smart, who can become very dedicated to this kind of personal development in community, in intellectual community, and the timing is not traditional or conventional for them.
All right.
And so if veterans think of themselves as reoriented, after some military service or a few years of different kind of life experience, it's very important that they recognize that whatever the transcript looks like 5 years ago or 4 years ago is not reflective of who they are now. And who they are now is of great value, can be of great value to any of these institutions, whether they want to go to community college or directly into professional education or whatever. That time of growing and being engaged in a lot of a certain kind of education, right, is a real thing. It doesn't have to be considered black time or unproductive time, and I would hope that veterans think about it as a form of value that they can bring to the intellectual conversation. And when they code it that way for themselves, then the kinds of essays they write about why they want to go to certain kinds of schools will be strong.
Right, absolutely. And you actually said something in your answer that to me touched on really a piece of advice to be successful in any school. Really, it's anything you do in life, but especially school. You said treat school like as a job. And that's something that me and another veteran here have talked about at length, is now that we've had this military time and had this personal growth and grown, both of us can come here and treat it like a job, where previously we weren't exactly treating school like a job before we joined. But actually doing that has alleviated a lot of pressure, because if you get up in the morning and you take your backpack and you go to the library and you study and you go to class, you come back and study, if you treat it like I won't say 8 to 5, I'll say 9 to 5.
Right.
If you treat it like a 9 to 5 and you do what you're supposed to do, it actually isn't that stressful, and you shouldn't need to be pulling all-nighters. Every time I've talked to the vet campus, when we have pulled an all-nighter, it's totally us. It's totally because we got lazy for a few days or a week.
It's a form of time management failure. It's not a valiant...
Right, no, it's not a valiant last charge.
Heroic last charge.
No, it's absolutely not. And I think that's a good piece of advice for people that are, and guys that are going to community colleges, and then if they go on to other things, could even be vocational school, whatever it is, treat that schooling like it's your job. Get up in the morning, shower, pour a cup of coffee, and then get in the library. And if you work and then you're done by 6 p.m., you can actually go and enjoy your evenings and not feel like, and that's something that I know a lot of vets, I hate homework. Who doesn't? I don't like it. Well, sometimes I like it if it's interesting, but for the most part, it's like, let's be honest, a bit of a nuisance. I'm like, oh God. But if you treat it like a job and you do most of your work like that, treat it like it's your profession, like you're a professional, you can have your evenings and watch whatever stupid Netflix show you want to watch and then go to bed and wake up and do it again. It doesn't have to be this. And every time I'm stressed with work, totally self-imposed. Like, it's not because, oh my God, like something about this school, Dartmouth, they just give me too much. Now, they do give you a lot, but once you start getting the swing of things and figure out how you read and study and time management, it's doable. Treat it like a profession. And then I actually just want to ask you real quick, as far as like you personally, why would you want to be the dean of a college? Because I you read all these papers and things. There's always all these politics in school, and like sometimes I'm just like, wow, I just couldn't deal with some of the issues and complaints, because you Spanish and Portuguese and you do comparative literature. So obviously that's like a passion for you, and you're teaching it and researching in it.
Yes. And
then what was like, you know what I need to add to my plate? I need to be the dean of the college. Like, what was that jump? and why?
Right. Yes. So I don't think I would have ever moved into an administrative role like the dean of the college if I weren't at Dartmouth in particular, and if Dartmouth hadn't embarked on a very concentrated and proactive effort to shift student culture a little bit more toward meeting the mission of the college. So this happened 3 years ago. The president announced this pretty ambitious project called Moving Dartmouth Forward. The president of Dartmouth.
Right.
And I'd been a professor here since 2006, as you mentioned. And, quite honestly, Dartmouth is the strangest institution of higher ed I've ever worked in. Strangest in really wonderful ways that are uniquely strong, and in some other ways that seem uniquely negative or difficult. And a lot of that has to do with points you were making earlier, that it's a rural setting. It's it can be isolating for many students from their communities elsewhere, the communities they come from. It also has an incredibly loyal and active alum community who are devoted to the future of Dartmouth. They're devoted to influencing the administration to preserve the aspects of the undergraduate student experience that they themselves remember and value. And we have students who are astoundingly talented, smart, prepared, and they want to make their mark wherever they are. And so during the time that they're here on campus, they want to be involved in the college. So that combination of things makes this a special place. And when there are tensions about the politics of resource allocation or what is perceived to be the college's attitude about student life beyond the classroom, when there are tensions about those things, the passions run really high.
Right.
Given that we have such a talented group of people here, and I don't mean just the students, then we have outstanding graduate students, amazingly prepared and professional staff, and obviously I think a world-class faculty. Given that we have all these people on campus, since I got here, it kept striking me as very distressing and compelling to think about how we could improve how we work together rather than kind of getting trapped in these tensions among really powerful voices and powerful needs. And so along with moving Dartmouth Forward, the upper administration changed the definition of the dean of the college job. In recent years, it had always been a student life professional, and they decided to pull in a full professor into the role. And so it seemed like an amazing moment to kind of use a lot of the research and theory that I've been working on in cultural studies. I work on narratives about violence, specifically in contemporary Mexican cultural criticism and cultural production, and the violence that all narratives actually enact. So if you tell a story about anything, you're having to cut out aspects of it. You're forcefully forming certain perspectives out of the raw material you're working with. It's metaphorical violence in one way, but it's also violence to truth or absolute knowledge whenever you tell a story, because you can't tell the whole thing because you're not God, right? So putting anything into language or into a narrative requires a politics of choices and manipulation. It's unavoidable. And so that's the kind of stuff I work on in my research and my teaching, and bringing what I've learned over the years into the dean of the college role is very similar. How does Dartmouth narrate itself to itself? All the different voices here. How can we more healthfully bring them all into alignment about the core mission of the college? And there have been a number of initiatives that have been taking place while I've been dean of the college that I'm in charge of, like the introduction of house communities is one of them. The introduction of the Posse Veterans Program is another. There are a host of things we're trying to do to try to shift the center of all the core that unites all the different narratives about Dartmouth. And really, I'm fascinated by the opportunity to take concrete action with the community members here at Dartmouth to improve how we synthesize all of our different narratives as much as we can.
It's interesting because I do a lot of reading of the different papers and the different opinions, and maybe this is just me talking. Maybe it's the grumpy side of me. But like with moving Dartmouth Forward, like you said, there's a lot of tensions that run high, and this is just an anecdotal comment from me from what you said. You don't have to really respond to this, but I'm like, it seems like on maybe it's a college thing, it's a young angst thing, and I've grown out of it. But it's like you have to fight the power. You have to like fight the man, quote unquote. And I'm like, because sometimes I'll read reviews in like the college newspaper or blogs or whatever, and I'm just like, that's your complaint. Like I just don't. And in a lot of it, I think even from a veteran's perspective, complaining about a solution it just really grates at me. And so when I read stuff, and like, because if I was in the military and someone we complain a lot, but if you want to officially, like in an actual thing, like complaining with your buddies is one thing, but if you want to officially make a complaint and you have nothing to offer me as a solution or have an idea, then like you're wasting my time, you're wasting our work time, you're wasting our efficiency. Like I just don't want to hear it. And so this is just me. I get like personally frustrated just like when I read some of this stuff, and there's always room for improvement, right? And it's good to have dissenting voices.
Yep.
You don't want to just have everyone thinking the same. But it almost seems like to me, it's like you guys could say, hey, we're going to give like gold bullion to every student, and they'd be like, "What's only one block, not two?" It'd be like, it's like, are you guys serious? Like, what? Like, really? And so, I've always wondered, like, and that was a great answer. I've always wondered what would possess one to leave their passion for research and their studies to take on their role. And I think it's a very good reason. I know moving Dartmouth Forward sometimes gets criticized. At least I've seen. I'll obviously say I'm biased because of that initiative. My veterans program got to get here, so obviously there's that bias there where I'm appreciative. And I'm sure there's kinks in everything. And there's criticisms about the house program, and there's that too. And when I went to high school, we had just started our house program. I remember the same thing happened. But everyone wants to be so critical, and this is, again, all my 2 cents. But the house program coming around, people see it as an attack on the Greek life system. And to me, I don't see it as that. The Greek life system is pretty strong here. Like, it's not going away anytime soon. And it doesn't need to go away. There's a lot of good things it does.
That's right.
It's not a bad thing. But it's also not a bad thing to have an alternative. If you never want to show up to a house event, then don't, fine, whatever. But there's people who it can help. There's people who don't want to do Greek life who can have another outlet. There's dudes older like me, again, nothing wrong with it. I don't want to join a frat. So there's a few events that I can go to and not have to sit alone in my room. And I have friends, but still, I have some friends.
It's
but
not that sad.
It's not that sad. Sometimes. No, it's not that sad.
But we should talk later, Taylor.
Yeah, we should talk later, yeah. It's not that big of a deal.
Right.
And I see all this stuff. So anyways, we could go on and on about
actually,
that.
I do have comments about your point about criticism without solutions and the developmental appropriateness of that for the majority age of our students. They're 18 to 22. My focus in my role is on the undergraduate population. And it's absolutely appropriate for that group of people to be testing out their sense of themselves as civic actors, their sense of themselves as members of a complex community, which is also a bureaucratic institution. They're moving from high school, which is, for most people, you're a passive recipient of those structures and you just try to get through them as successfully as you can. And when you become a member of a college like this one, and not all universities work this way, but you're expected to contribute your best ideas, thoughts, and suggestions to the collective enterprise. We promote that, but it also means it's very difficult. This is a personal confession as an administrator. I don't like having people criticize things without giving solutions. It's emotionally hard to get that endless stream of just bitching at you, On the other hand, when I think as an educator that's a wonderful thing, because regardless of the specific proposal or policy, which we may or may not be able to change for all kinds of reasons that any given student who's complaining may not know about, right? When we help educate and foster and nurture each student's idea that they should be an active, engaged, and proactive participant in making any common enterprise work better, I think we're succeeding.
Right.
So it is annoying and it's personally taxing to deal with that sort of thing, but that is the work of collective education.
Right.
In a community. So on my better days, I think of it as evidence of our success in having the correct focus on what we're doing.
Right. And this brings up something to me, and this will be kind of this will be my last little rant on it. But I guess when I do see criticisms of stuff like the moving Dartmouth Forward, because I see it a lot. I'm sure there's, of course, things that could be improved, right? It's like anything else in life. But there's a lot of good things that come from it that no one emphasizes. And no one emphasizes the fact that it is, like, at least selfishly, since this is the theme of my podcast and part of my life, it brought this veteran initiative, or kind of pushed it for, President Wright started it. So we had the transfer vets. But now you have this whole other thing where you're guaranteed to have 10 new Posse Foundation veterans a year for a total of 40 once the four years go through. So you'll be consistently having 40 on top of transfer vets.
Right.
So that's 40 more per year than we ever would have had before.
Yep.
And to me, this gets to a deeper thing. And people or Americans like to constantly say, we support the troops, we love the troops, things like that. And it's all just
in that superficial way.
It's superficial.
Yeah.
And it's like, if people here on campus, and I hear a lot, there's a lot of patriotism, especially even from a Greek life community. Greek life people seem to really, frats to me always seem like they have American flags, they love the country, American flag shorts, whatever. They're all about it. It's like, well, if you're really about it, you can critique some moving Dartmouth Forward stuff. I'm sure there's stuff to improve on. But how come no one ever talks about the good things that happen? Like, you get 40 new veterans who served.
Yes.
And many of us were in combat and did things, and get to come here. That's a huge positive.
And take up leadership positions on campus.
Yeah, right. And take up leadership positions on campus. And that is never spoken of. Mm-hmm. And the positives are never spoken of. And so you can claim to be a proponent of diversity, or you can claim to be a patriot who supports the troops, yet that was one of the results of moving Dartmouth Forward, was bringing in more veterans and bringing in more diversity. And no one really has anything positive to say about that. And I think from my end, and this again gets deeper, there's this societal thing they like to be superficial about supporting veterans, but the initiatives to actually do it, the hard work of doing it, they're like, I would rather just put a yellow ribbon sticker in my car and just call it a day.
Yeah, but when you say no one talks about the good things, I don't think that's entirely fair.
That's probably not.
A lot of people do.
They do. I mean, you have the whole picture view, and I think of you probably, because it's your job here, here all sides. Maybe I'm just reading maybe I'm self-seeking out the negative articles so I can be angry and grumpy. Maybe that's what I'm doing.
It could be.
So there could be some bias there as far as
we all do that.
My sampling. But yeah, it's just something that it was just a personal observation for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. But anyways, I appreciate you coming on today. I appreciate your time. It's a good chat. And I hope anyone listening got a better insight into thinking that a school like this is obtainable if you're willing to put in the hard work and do the things you need to do. This isn't some way far out of reach concept. You can actually go to a good school and you can be successful at a good school, treat it like a job, and do the things you're supposed to do, and it can work out. Okay, so I want to say thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Taylor.
All right, and with that, you've been listening to the Greenside Podcast.